Sometimes we just have those days where you can't seem to get maybe out of your own way or out of something else's way, and you just wind up having a bad day. Now, I know a lot of times most people think boating, good days and fun, but guess what? Sometimes you can't get out of things way in boating either, and today we'll discuss a little bit about that, things that you probably want to try and avoid when you're out there on the water. Hopefully most of our boaters that we see today have the same kind of luck as this crew, because somehow they pulled this off even though it was a close call. Welcome back to this week's episode of Boneheaded Boaters of the Week. Now, in boating, there are going to be plenty of things you're going to want to avoid out on the water, but guess what? It still starts on land. So typically I would tell you to avoid jackknifing the trailer, but apparently this guy just figured out the new easy method of backing the trailer out of the parking spot. Another thing I would try and tell you to avoid out on the water, that's going to be bad weather days. Days where you might find yourself out in some choppy or heavy seas. A lot of times when this will happen, it'll pop up quick and you may find yourself trying to run home to get ahead of the weather. But this crew took trying to beat the weather home to a whole new level. Another item you may want to try and avoid when you're out there on the water, well, that's going to be other boats. Now, when I say avoid other boats, I'm not telling you to go out there and be an introvert on the water. Obviously, if we're going out there, we're going out to have a good time, have a little fun, relax and chill with friends. There's probably going to be other boats around, and you're probably going to want to interact with them. But you just have to remember that there's a time and a place for everything, and certain boats are going to require interaction, and other vessels you're going to want to stay as far away from as you possibly can, because the interaction's probably not going to be a fun one if you get a little too close. So anytime you're approaching vessels out on the water, always remember to stop and really assess the situation. Is this a boat you need to get close to? And assess what that boat's doing. If that boat's working or towing something, probably best to be left alone. Yes, there are rules of the road out on the water, and certain vessels that will have right of way, but one of the golden rules you always have to remember is it doesn't matter who has the right of way. It's your responsibility to avoid a collision or accident at all costs. And I would definitely never count on a boat giving up right of way or coming to a stop just because they're supposed to. You want to avoid it at all costs. And speaking of avoiding things and coming to a stop, there are plenty of ways that our day is going to come to a stop out on the water. Some of them we're gonna see, other times, well, we're not gonna see them until it's a little bit too late. Boating is definitely a little bit different than getting out there and driving on the road, and on unfamiliar waterways you have to exercise extreme caution because you never know what you could run into. Unlike when you're driving on an unfamiliar road, at least you're probably gonna see debris and things and hazards around you. Water, yes, there are some things you'll see. Obviously, we'll see other vessels coming. We'll see docks, piers, markers, and things like that. But there's a lot of things that you won't see coming that lie just below the surface of the water that can become exceptionally dangerous. Obviously, rocks, sandbars, things like that are items you could run up on pretty quickly. But one of the big ones, just like the last image we saw, is going to be logs. Logs will float just below the surface of the water and can be extremely dangerous. I know in my local area, I hear about it at least once a year of somebody hitting a log at speed and causing severe damage. Now this one's a little different. Logs on land we typically can see. You wouldn't think it'd be too much of a hazard to a vessel, but I guess they can be as well. Of course, the most common hazard that you're not going to be able to get out of the way of sometimes on the water is going to be a sandbar or a shoal. They're just below the surface of the water, so of course we can't see them, and typically by the time we do see them, if we get close enough, it's already too late. Which is one of the reasons, again, when you're on waterways you're not familiar with, you always have to use caution, trust GPSs, listen to local knowledge, and stay in marked channels. But even waterways you're familiar with, just because you took a path at one point in time during the day, doesn't mean you'll be able to take that same path home. Water levels fluctuate, and it's another thing you have to watch when you're out there boating. Another item I would tell you to avoid when you're out there on the water, well, that's going to be wildlife. Yes, it sounds fun to engage with marine animals or animals around the water, but the reality, if they're in a wild habitat or situation, it's best to be admired from a distance. And the last thing you're going to want to avoid when you get out there in your local waterways, well, that's going to be those googans or those boneheaded boaters. Sometimes they'll be easily spotted, other times not so much, but if you see one out there and you quickly identify them, probably best to steer away. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Boneheaded Boaters of the Week. If you ever see anything crazy happening on your waterways, be sure to hit us up on Facebook or Instagram and let us know, and you might see your stories over here. Just like Adam Coolidge, Josh Onlock, Charlie DeVito 73, Joni Shaden, Clyde Strickland, Lisa Fisher Radford, Landon T. Bender, Mackie Mark 305, and Towboat Naples did this week. And if you guys haven't already, go ahead and drop an anchor on the subscribe button here.